Picture this. You sit down one Sunday evening with your coffee, open a fresh spreadsheet, and tell yourself, this time is different. This time you are actually going to stick to a budget. You type in your income. You list your rent, your car payment, your groceries, your utilities. You move a few numbers around, and for about 11 minutes, you feel genuinely good about your finances. Then you look at what is left after the debt payments, and something shifts in your chest. The credit card sitting at $6,800. The car loan at $14,200. The student loan that you stopped opening mail about 2 years ago at somewhere north of $31,000. You do the math. You run the numbers 3 different ways, hoping one of the versions will come out differently. And you realize that even if you stop spending money on everything except absolute necessities, you are still barely moving the needle. So you close the laptop. You tell yourself you will revisit it next month when things calm down. And next month never comes. Here is what nobody told you about that moment. The budget was not the problem. You are not the problem. The real problem is that most people try to build a budget on top of a debt structure that is mathematically designed to absorb every dollar of margin you create. You cut your grocery bill by $40, and your interest charges quietly eat that $40 before you ever feel it. You pick up an extra shift, and the minimum payment clock just keeps running. The game feels rigged because, in a very specific way, it is. But here is the thing that changes everything. The moment you understand how debt and budgeting interact at the psychological level, to not just the mathematical one, the entire picture shifts. Getting debt-free is not the reward you get after finally learning to budget. Getting debt-free is the thing that makes budgeting actually work for the first time in your life. My name is Nick, and I spend probably too much time thinking about why smart, disciplined people stay trapped in debt for years while genuinely trying to escape it. If you have ever built a budget that lasted 3 weeks before collapsing, make sure you hit that subscribe button because we are about to go somewhere most financial advice completely skips. Before we get into the mechanics, let me ask you something honest. When you imagine your life without a single debt payment, what is the first thing you feel? Most people say relief, and then almost immediately after, that they say something like that will never happen for me. And that second reaction is not pessimism. It is actually your brain doing something specific that researchers in behavioral finance have spent decades studying. There is a concept called learned financial helplessness, which works almost identically to the more well-known psychological concept of learned helplessness in general. When a person makes repeated attempts to change a situation and repeatedly fails, the brain stops initiating attempts entirely. It reframes the situation as permanent rather than temporary. You did not stop believing you could get debt-free because you are not motivated. You stopped believing it because your brain watched you build 11 budgets that did not work, and quietly concluded that budgeting is something that works for other people. And your brain, trying to protect you from the pain of another failure, stopped generating genuine effort. This is not a character flaw. This is survival software running exactly as designed. The other thing happening underneath all of this is what psychologists call scarcity thinking, and it is far more expensive than most people realize. When your budget is this tight, when the margin between your income and your obligations is measured in dozens of dollars rather than hundreds, your cognitive bandwidth shrinks measurably. Researchers at Princeton and Harvard found that the mental overhead of managing financial scarcity consumes the equivalent of roughly 13 IQ points of cognitive function. You are not making worse decisions about your money because you are careless. See here? You are making worse decisions because your brain is already running at partial capacity, just managing the stress of the situation. The budget keeps failing partly because you are trying to build it with a mind that is already exhausted from carrying the weight of the debt that makes the budget necessary in the first place. And here is the part that should make this feel less like a personal failure and more like a solvable problem. The moment the debt starts visibly shrinking, even before it is gone, the scarcity thinking starts loosening. The cognitive load drops. Decisions get clearer. The budget that felt impossible to maintain starts feeling manageable not because your income changed, but because your brain has room to work with again. Now let us talk about the mathematics. Because this is where things stop being abstract and start being genuinely motivating. Most people understand in a vague way that debt costs them money every month in interest, but almost nobody has actually done the calculation on what that number means in real terms. Let me show you. Take a relatively common debt picture. $6,800 on a credit card at 22% annual interest. $14,200 on a car loan at 7.9%. $31,000 in student loans at 6.5%. Run the interest on those three balances, and you are paying somewhere between $380 and $430 per month in pure interest. Not principal. Interest. That is money that leaves your account every single month and builds nothing, buys nothing, produces nothing except the right to keep carrying the debt for another 30 days. That is between $4,500 and $5,100 per year, year after year, and for as long as those balances exist. And this is the number that breaks open the math for most people. Because $380 to $430 per month is not a small rounding error. That is a car payment. That is a grocery bill. That is the difference between a budget that breathes and a budget that suffocates. The entire reason your budget has no margin is not that you spend too much on coffee. It is that nearly $400 of every month's income is evaporating before you ever make a conscious decision about it. Here is where the compounding logic flips in your favor. If you commit to a structured payoff strategy and find an extra $200 per month beyond your minimum payments, something mathematically remarkable happens. That credit card at $6,800 is gone in under 2 years instead of over 9. The interest you do not pay becomes money you get to redirect. And you stack that freed payment onto the next debt. Your monthly payment toward debt 2 does not stay at the minimum, it grows. Then debt 2 falls, and that combined payment rolls onto debt 3. Financial planners call this the debt snowball or debt avalanche, depending on whether you prioritize smallest balance or highest interest rate first. The underlying mathematics is the same in either approach. Your payment momentum compounds exactly like interest does, except instead of compounding against you, it is compounding for you. What took years to build starts dismantling in months. And the psychological side of this matters just as much as the math. Research shows that paying off even one small account, regardless of its size, significantly increases the probability that a person pays off the next account. So your brain receives proof of something it stopped believing. And self-efficacy, the measurable belief in your own ability to succeed, begins rebuilding around your identity as someone who eliminates debt rather than someone who manages it indefinitely. So what does this actually look like in practice? Here is a 4-step framework that is designed to work with your psychology rather than assume you have infinite willpower. Step 1. Build a budget with permission actually written into it. The number one reason budgets collapse in the first 3 weeks is that they are built entirely around restriction with no acknowledgement of the emotional reality of spending. Before you cut a single line item, assign every dollar a specific job. And include a real, non-negotiable discretionary line, even if it is only $30 or $40. And your brain needs proof that the budget is not a punishment. And that proof comes specifically from seeing that some spending is allowed and intentional. When spending feels chosen rather than accidental, the guilt cycle that leads to emotional overspending begins breaking down. Step 2. Identify your debt payoff order and commit to it in writing. List every balance you carry, every interest rate, and every minimum payment. Then choose your approach. If you need fast psychological momentum, go smallest balance first. If you are mathematically motivated and can sustain the longer runway, go highest interest rate first. Either works. What does not work is changing strategies every 6 weeks because you read a different article. Pick the method you can maintain and stay on it. Step 3. Automate every payment the day after your paycheck deposits. The single most reliable predictor of consistent debt payoff is not income level, motivation level, or financial knowledge. It is whether the payment happens automatically before you make any discretionary spending decision. Automation removes willpower from the equation entirely, which matters because willpower is a finite daily resource and you need yours for everything else. Step 4. Create one visible reminder of what the debt is actually costing you. Write down your monthly interest total. Put it somewhere you see it every few days. Not as a punishment, but as a reference point. People who stay connected to the real cost of carrying debt, not just the balance but the ongoing monthly drain, make meaningfully different decisions about where extra money goes. Here is what nobody says out loud at the end of these conversations. The zero balance is not the finish line. The zero balance is the starting line. Every budget you have ever built in your life, you built while carrying a structural handicap. You were trying to make a system work, while $400 per month was leaving through a drain in the floor you could not see. The version of budgeting you have never experienced yet is budgeting where that drain is closed, where $380 that used to vanish in interest stays in your account, waiting for you to decide where it goes, where a month with an unexpected expense does not automatically become a month where everything else falls apart. The people who describe getting debt-free do not usually say they feel rich. They say they finally feel like they can breathe. And they feel the cognitive weight lift. They describe checking their bank balance and not feeling that familiar tightening in the chest. That is not a financial event. That is a neurological one. Your brain, freed from the scarcity overhead, starts working differently. The budget you could never quite make stick starts feeling like second nature. The savings goal that always felt theoretical starts filling up in a way that finally seems real. Small decisions made consistently over time do not add up. They multiply. And the version of your financial life on the other side of the last debt payment is not some distant fantasy. It is just math and behavior, finally working together, finally working for you.